This webinar is how hidden SolidWorks import errors could be costing you a fortune. This is all about CAD validation. This webinar is going to be available afterwards at designworldonline.com, and you'll be sent an email with that information. We are going to have questions and answers at the end of the presentation. I'd like to introduce you to our presenter. Our presenter is Lyle Fisher, who is the Technical Marketing Director for CAD Video. Lyle's been in the CAD industry for a very long time. He was one of the developers of one of the original geometric modeling kernels called ZOX back in the 1980s. So he really knows the inside of how CAD modeling works.
And welcome everybody to this webinar. Very glad to have your time this afternoon. First I want to kind of take a little time to introduce who CAD Video is. We're a global company. We've been working in the CAD area for a very long time. We specialize in everything to do with CAD data, translation, and some CFD applications. We've actually been working with SolidWorks since 1995. We have 4 products for SolidWorks. A couple of them are gold certified, so we know our way around SolidWorks. We've been doing this for a very long time. We also utilize the SolidWorks reseller channel throughout the world, so many of you probably know us through your SolidWorks reseller as well. Hidden SolidWorks import errors. I think it's kind of useful to give you an analogy here of English translation. So if you take the William Shakespeare quote, "It is not in the stars to hold our destiny, but in ourselves." And you run that through an online translation tool through a Korean language and spit it back out in English, it's quite different. It now says, "It can hold our destiny in the stars, but it does not own." Well, the same thing is true in CAD translation. Sometimes you do a translation of a CAD model, and through the translation process on the other side, you get something quite different. This is where we're going to focus about how we can detect and find these kind of errors when we're using SolidWorks. But first, it's kind of important to understand why these errors occur. There are many differences between SolidWorks and other CAD systems. There's data formats. You have the neutral file formats, IGES, STEP, CATIA, or you have native file formats, CATIA, Unigraphics, ProE, and others. But each one has its own geometry kernel, which means they all have their own mathematics, their own way of representing geometry, topology, and, to make matters worse, they also have their own notions of model tolerances. So these all can play into the translation errors that SolidWorks experiences. And actually, it's true for all CAD systems. SolidWorks is not unique in this fact that data translation is difficult because of all these situations. If you look at the bottom here, what you see in this window with 13 surfaces, this is CATIA v4. Now, as this is translated to CATIA v5, which is a different modeling kernel, you can see a change. We now have 226 surfaces where there was only 13. Same thing happens when you go to SolidWorks. This is CATIA v6. The same thing happens here. We have a difference from CATIA v4 to CATIA v6. Now, you all know that SolidWorks is going to be releasing a new version. There's a lot of uncertainty yet about what's going to happen here, that a new version of SolidWorks will be released, is planned to be released with CATIA v6 at this modeling kernel. So that's yet another level of another situation where there's going to be differences. That's really why we're here, to help SolidWorks help manage and identify these differences for the users as they use SolidWorks between any CAD system, even between SolidWorks and the proposed new SolidWorks CATIA v6 version. Let's focus on, I'll just explain one issue here, the model tolerance, why it's important, what can happen. Here we have a solid in CATIA v5. Now CATIA v5 has a very tight tolerance. SolidWorks is a little bit larger. It's similar to the Unigraphics and Parasolid because they're all based on a Parasolid kernel. If you don't deal with these tolerances correctly, you can easily get some inconsistencies such as overlaps, gaps, and deformation. Here you can see the CATIA solid brought into SolidWorks. There's some deformation. There's some issues. And that's due, in this example, it's due to tolerance. Another issue you've probably seen if you've experienced SolidWorks and you're working with data from CATIA or ProE, CATIA and ProE allow touching surfaces. That's called non-manifold topology. Whereas SolidWorks and Unigraphics and ACEs do not. So that's another difference between kernels that can show up as you're working with different types of data from different CAD systems. Here's a known issue from CATIA, between CATIA and SolidWorks. In CATIA, a cylinder is always represented by two halves. In SolidWorks, for example, it's a single surface. Now, if you don't take this into account when you export this cylinder to CATIA, you can run into some real issues here if it's not done correctly. That's just a little bit of background on the different errors and different kernels and why this problem exists. But for SolidWorks, I want to focus on that a little bit now because that's why we're here today, to help you understand and detect some of these errors. Using SolidWorks, you can get some very visible errors, some non-visible or invisible errors that you don't know they're there. You can have surface fragmentations, surface curvature loss, surface tendency loss. Sometimes even the inner definition can actually change. These are very difficult to detect, if not impossible to trace within SolidWorks. SolidWorks does have some tools that can help, but our job as CapVidia, as a partner provider, is to help SolidWorks make it be the very, very best that it can be. And to do that, we allow the users to perform an external audit. And that external audit is Compareworks. I'm going to run an example of Compareworks just to show you how this works. Compareworks, like I said, is an add-in for SolidWorks where it allows you to compare the data you're translating into SolidWorks. So let's use an example of ProE, native ProE translation to SolidWorks. We select the SolidWorks ProE translator. I'm going to open a sample ProE part, and SolidWorks will do the translation. Now, SolidWorks gives us options here. There's more than one way to import a ProE file to SolidWorks. I'm going to try the knitting option where I want it to form a solid model. There's my translation. Now, Compareworks pops up. It's an option you can turn on or off, but every time you import a model, you'll be asked the question, do I want to validate that model? And the reason we want to validate that is because we want to make sure the SolidWorks translation actually matches the original ProE model. So if I say yes, Compareworks now is going to compare the SolidWorks translation of this model with the original ProE file. And look at that. Compareworks has detected a change. We can show these changes in Compareworks. We have a compare tree. Now this is very nice, very handy because it shows you some very nice information. We have 31 matching entities. That means 31 of these surfaces are exactly the same in SolidWorks as they are in a match in ProE. And we have no deviation, which means the geometry is the same, but we've identified two surfaces are missing. So two surfaces exist in the ProE file, and they don't exist in the SolidWorks translation. We can actually show you where they are. If you go up through the compare tree, you double-click, there's a missing surface. There's the other one. Now, we also draw those in SolidWorks so you can actually see where they're supposed to be in your model. If we zoom into that area, you'll see where the missing surface is. Now that's drawn in a gray purple color. You can see it's the outline of it here. It's not there. It's simply not there. And this is kind of interesting because how would you know? How would you know that this translation is wrong? There's no tool in SolidWorks to give you any kind of indication about that. Okay, so what can you do in this situation? Well, with Compareworks, you have an option. You have a way around something like this. Let's throw this translation away because it's useless. Let's try another approach. Remember, I said ProE has more than one way to do a translation. So we'll go through the same process again, open up the ProE part again, but this time I'm going to use the import BRED option. Now there's no rhyme or reason to which one you use. My best advice would be the one that gives you the correct answer is the one you use. So let's use the BREP option and see if that can help us. There's our translation. Let's validate the model. Now, we have different information. This is good information. And that's actually a very good point of Compareworks. Its value is not only finding differences, but giving you the confidence and assurance that you got it right. And right now, what we're showing you here is that this SolidWorks translation is the same as the original Pro E representation. And we can actually show that in a report. This report is automatically generated and gives you some very nice information that you can use in your organization. It's fully automatic. It shows you the header file for the SolidWorks file, the Pro E file, get a picture of the part, and at the bottom here you can actually sign and date this, your acceptance figure, which you can hand out to your customers or your manager and say, look, we're using SolidWorks, we're doing translation, we're manufacturing this part, it's correct. So now you have a traceable procedure with Compareworks. So that's a little introduction of how we can use Compareworks to do some simple comparison for translation. But how can these kind of errors cost you money? Well, we have some practical examples through the years from a lot of our customers and a lot of people that just come to us and say, look, we have issues, we have problems, what's going on here? One of those is a supplier for Boeing. They actually make airplane windows, and this customer was making windows for the airplane. So what they did is they actually used SolidCam to import the window geometry. This is on the left. And there were some issues here. The geometry actually changed here. The topology changed. It should be one smooth surface, but it's not. On the right here, we have the actual finished part. And you can see this is very rough here. This part was brought into SolidWorks, into SolidCam, machined, sent to Boeing, and rejected. Boeing sent it back and says, this is unacceptable. And it's unacceptable because you can see the surface roughness here is not very good. Now, at an insult to injury, it's bad enough that your part gets rejected. It's an embarrassment for your company. But what they also had to do is hand sand these on the shop floor. So people actually on the shop floor hand sanding these areas to get a smooth finish, because you need to get it actually affects how light comes through the window and reflects into the airplane. So here's a real life problem that actually happened, where this kind of thing can cost you a lot of time, money, not to mention embarrassment. Let's look at this in the light of Compareworks. How will Compareworks help you detect something like this, and what's really going on here? Well, as you see here, the original window's up here, but it's got different topology now after it's been translated. Instead of having one surface, it's got 11. Interesting enough, this is where the exact same place that the CNC machine had issues getting a nice finish. So there's a direct correlation between the translation and the manufacturing process. And this really is the surface defragmentation issue I mentioned earlier, where you bring the surface into SolidWorks and it can't handle these complex surfaces, so it splits them up into smaller surface patches. A lot of people can machine these, but in some cases, and this is one of them, it's not so easy, and it's really problematic. So if you can detect this early on, you can save yourself a lot of time, money, and of course embarrassment. And how does a model like that influence the surface roughness? Well, just look at the toolpath direction. As you see, with no surface exposure, we have a nice clean translation. The toolpath goes back and forth, very nice, very easily, very smoothly, and gives you a nice smooth finish. Whereas in this case, the tool has to go up and down, got a different toolpath, and you can immediately see that we have more of a raw finish versus the smooth finish. Okay, so we covered a little bit just importing models to SolidWorks and validating them right after translation. But there's other ways that you can model a part inside of SolidWorks. Many of you use the import diagnosis tools in SolidWorks. It has healing. And those of you who use it for quite some time, you know how it works. It can do some wonderful things, but it can also make some drastic changes to the model, and a lot of these you don't even know about. Another thing you can do in SolidWorks is FeatureWorks. FeatureWorks can recognize certain features. That also changes the model. And when you do a rebuild, you need some way of knowing that after FeatureWorks has been applied, that hasn't changed your model. And of course, a lot of people would love to have a fully feature history tree translation from any CAD system into SolidWorks. That's just not possible. So your only option here is to completely remaster the part from scratch. So for example, if I take a Pro E file and I redesign it from scratch in SolidWorks. I have a completely new part full of all SolidWorks history and features. But one question still remains. Is it exactly the same as my Pro E model or not? And that's where Compareworks can come in. You can do all this wonderful work in SolidWorks designing a part, but we can tell you, give the assurances that your new design matches the original model 100%. Let's look at the SolidWorks import diagnosis tool. It's very good at detecting faulty faces, gaps. It does that for you. Okay. It also has an attempt to heal all function. Well, let's look at an example. A lot of the changes in healing it does is hard to detect. It's hard to see. You don't really realize all the changes it makes. This one's a little bit obvious. If I attempt to heal all in this particular area, you'll see that it'll deform the geometry. So are you aware that something like this even happens? Most people aren't. It happens without them knowing it. And this change is really not that visible. And more importantly, you are not informed because you still have this imported solid here. More importantly, the import diagnosis check, it will say there aren't any faulty gaps or surfaces. So this is another place where SolidWorks can actually change a model and you have no idea whether it's right or wrong. Again, that Compareworks can answer that question for you. Let's talk about FeatureWorks. What happens after we try feature recognition? Here we have a solid B rep, very nice translation. We apply FeatureWorks to it. Look at that. We've got all kinds of features here, which is very, very nice. But is it the same as the original model? How do you know? How can you know that it's the same? If you employ Compareworks to this, you will see, indeed, we detected some changes. And here's one of those. This little piece of geometry here doesn't match the original file. So another area where FeatureWorks or where Compareworks can greatly help you eliminate costly errors early on in the process. So how do we do it? How does Compareworks work? Well, just remember one thing. We answer this basic question. Is the same model, is the original model that we import to SolidWorks the same? We use the terminology original model or authority model as a point of reference for our SolidWorks translation. We're asking the basic question, give the basic answer to these questions. Do I have the same volume, surface area, and center of mass? Is the geometry the same? Topology, has that changed through the translation to SolidWorks? And do I have the same attributes? So that's what Compareworks does. It answers that question for you to give that assurance or answer that it's either right or it's wrong based on these criteria. So here's a process and flow we use within Compareworks. We start with our authority model of data representation. You translate this into SolidWorks via the parasolid kernel. Now this is a representation. You have the translation. Likewise, we take this authority model into the CapVidia kernel, and that becomes the authority reference model. Now we developed our own geometry kernel over the last 15 years for one specific reason, to capture and hold the entity data structures from all different CAD systems. It's a kernel designed specifically to deal with interoperability. And as such, we have developed a very nice way, unique way of maintaining the original data structures and entity structure in our kernel. That allows us to perform an external audit where, using the SolidWorks API, we can grab the SolidWorks geometry and we can compare in our geometry kernel to the original model. Then we get our answer, either a change or no change. And out of this process, you get a report. That's the process and flow which Compareworks uses to do an external audit of a SolidWorks model to the original authority data set. Let's look at another example of how you can use Compareworks. This time we're going to use IGES. A lot of people are afraid of IGES, but you really shouldn't be, because when you have a tool like this, you can use it to help you understand what's going on with your IGES translation. So we open an IGES file with SolidWorks, we do the translation, and we get our result. Again, the question that we ask, do you want to validate this? Yes, we do. We've detected some changes. Let's look at those with Compareworks. Again, our compare tree has all the information organized. This time, we got 284 surfaces that match, but 8 of those have a deviation. Now, this is a geometric deviation, which means the geometry doesn't quite match the original one. The earlier example had a different, which means those surfaces were missing. These surfaces exist, but they're not quite the same. So let's look in SolidWorks to see what this looks like. If we zoom into that same area, it's pretty evident, pretty obvious here what's going on. We have drawn in a purplish transparent color the original surfaces in the IGES file. And as you can see, that corner there is deformed. It's supposed, the SolidWorks model in this orange color is supposed to be out here. It's just not. So likely what happened, this entire edge or edges got collapsed, I don't know. But the point here is that we're giving you real information that this is not only just not right, but where's it wrong. Likewise, this edge was collapsed to a point. There's other errors, but these are the obvious ones. Now, SolidWorks has an import diagnosis tool that can fix these things, right? Well, let's look at the faces it's identified. Interestingly enough, these 3 surfaces that it's identified aren't the ones that we found in Compareworks. So we do the healing, attempt to heal all, and see what happens. All the faulty gaps or faces are fixed. But now we're back to this question. Is it correct? Has anything else changed after the SolidWorks healing? What's nice about Compareworks is that we also give you the flexibility to use it anytime you want to. So many of you have workflows where you import a model, oh, you know, some surfaces are missing, or you see some of these errors, you say, well, I can correct that. I know how to do that with SolidWorks. So you go and you manually edit, manually fix things. But there comes a point you still need to know if it's right. So here you can run Compareworks from our menu and say, validate models. When you hit this command, what we do is we ask you, give me the external data model that was used to import into SolidWorks so we can do, again, this external audit. In this case, it's the IGES file. We bring it in to our geometry kernel, and we compare it against this representation. Change detected. Okay, we still have some issues here. Let's take a look at those. Again, still have those 8 deviated entities. They haven't been changed. The SolidWorks model's still deformed. This is kind of an interesting moment for a SolidWorks user because the import diagnosis tool says there are no faulty gaps in the model anymore. It's a clean solid for all practical purposes. But clearly with Compareworks, you can see that it's wrong. So where do you go from here? What do you do? Well, you could go back to your customer and say, look, we're having issues. They're going to say, what kind of issues? Well, luckily for you, we have a report that captures all of these changes for you. We expand the deviant entities folder. We capture and hold all this information for you. So what you're seeing here, the yellow is the original geometry from the IGES file. Green is a SolidWorks surface. Gray, that's this green-yellow surface overlaid to show you where it actually should be. So you can clearly see here pieces of the corner, piece of that edge was collapsed, and what it was supposed to look like. So now you can go back to your customer and say, look, I got this model from you. I have a lot of trouble translating it into SolidWorks. Perhaps you can give me another model, or you might even have other suppliers that are going to have issues with this. I just thought you should know about this. So communications are a very nice thing, very nice tool within our software for this report. You can see everything that's wrong. We even store the deviation, maximum deviation value for you to record and pass on to other ones. So, all right, so that's another example of how you use Compareworks and how you can use it in many ways to answer that basic question. Has my model changed? And if so, how? The report, I just showed you a couple instances of that. Our report allows you to have a fully documented and traceable process. I mean, we have the header information from the part for both parts. We can expand these reports. They're customizable. You can get very short or very detailed reports. These reports allow you to be compliant with any kind of quality standards. It's ISO 9000. Also the Boeing D6 requirement, which is for their suppliers. And again, this is fully integrated within SolidWorks, so it's very easy to use and very handy to use inside of SolidWorks. I mentioned the Boeing D6, and it's important to talk about that for a little bit because we didn't invent the concept of validation. In fact, this came out of our work with Boeing. They have this D6 5191 requirement for their suppliers where it says you must include a method to verify the accuracy of the translations. And so that's where this technology, the idea, notion for Compareworks comes is to build a tool like this for suppliers so they can immediately give that answer to their customers via the report. They should give a report to their customers and say, look, here's the validation report for our part that we're using that we got from you. All right, so Compareworks, kind of summing up here, it's a very nice tool to help you compare and validate CAD models against any criteria that you may have. It easily identifies it and helps you manage any kind of shape changes. Typically, this is being used in anybody that requires a digital process of certifying the 3D CAD data. And Boeing's a great example. A lot of aerospace companies, Department of Defense, that are also jumping on this and doing that. It's a real direction that the industry is going to do validation of translations. We can help you out in your normal day-to-day use. You want to detect any changes in data translation, or if you're remastering a whole bunch of parts, you can use this tool to help you understand if you got it right, or if it's wrong, what do we need to do? And by the way, if Compareworks always tells you the answer is no change, that's a good thing too. That helps give you confidence and that you're working with really good data. You can also use this to discover any kind of change in design revisions. A lot of times you'll have a part, you start working on it, and they say, hold on, we made a change. Well, what change did you make? Well, you can compare that in Compareworks and actually figure out how they changed it to help you understand better what's going on in your process. We can also help you, it also works in assembly, so you can use Compareworks on assembly to make sure as you're moving assemblies around that nothing's changed, or if it is changed, how it's been changed. So the real benefit here is helping you guys to really kind of streamline your workflow, avoid those expensive mistakes when you're manufacturing, bring prediction to the process that use 3D CAD data. There's a lot of talk about model-based enterprise, model-based definition. We actually help SolidWorks comply with that by giving them the possibility to actually compare models for reuse. And of course, this complies with the standards that are out there from the Boeing folks and Department of Defense and other organizations where you need to document and validate your process. As I've shown you through the demonstration, it's quite easy to use, very easy to use, and even easy to integrate within your company's procedures. What are the advantages? Why would you want to use Compareworks? Well, there's a lot of migration going on between different CAD systems, CATIA, Creo, Pro-E, Autodesk, all these CAD systems. Whenever you have to migrate data to SolidWorks, well, I mean, a lot of companies, they'll buy a different company and they're all working in Pro-E. We're based on SolidWorks. So migration is always happening to SolidWorks. And Compareworks now gives you a way to make sure that migration is done right. If you're going to take over a division of a company and bring all their parts into SolidWorks, wouldn't it be nice to know that when you migrate it, you got it right? And for those people that want to remaster stuff, again, that's another solution, another migration workflow to compare your remastered models back to the original definition. Now, we can also assist you with SolidWorks V1, which is what a lot of you are using right now, and your work in the future with SolidWorks V6 based on the CATIA kernel. SolidWorks V1 is going to be around for a very, very long time. And there's going to be this back and forth between, at least I believe, this back and forth between SolidWorks V1 and SolidWorks V6. I mean, if you just look at what's happening in CATIA, CATIA V5 has been on the market for what, over 10, 15 years now? There are still people migrating from CATIA V4 to CATIA V5, and all those issues I mentioned earlier exist in getting the geometry, topology right, making sure there's no errors. So Compareworks is here, and we'll be here for quite some time to help you as you work between different CAD systems and what SolidWorks brings in the future. So we're positioned, ready to help you work with those two different systems as they come in more and more active. And of course, as we said earlier, we're all about saving you money. If you can eliminate some of those manufacturing errors and use SolidWorks and Compareworks to help do that, that'll save you a lot of time and money, a lot of headaches and a lot of embarrassment. So, but that's the main thing too. I think, as I said earlier, it's okay to use Compareworks and get things to pass, because that's a good answer. That's a confidence builder for you. And when you want to use SolidWorks in your process, you know you got the model right. And again, it's always useful to be able to detect things early on as you're working with imported data. Summing up, I just want to remind you that no matter what CAD system you're using, there's always going to be a difference between these CAD systems. You just need to find them. You just need to find them. Now, we are offering a free trial version of Compareworks. For those of you who are interested, you can go to our website. We will be at SolidWorks World 2013 in booth 514. We hope that you guys stop and see us. We are running some promotions to the end of this year and to the up till around SolidWorks World, so you might want to take advantage of some more promotions that we have going on. We encourage you to try it out and go to our website, and you can do that. At this point, I think we need to open up for questions.
Okay, well, thanks. I'm going to ask a few questions myself first, since I'm doing this webinar with you. I get to ask you a few questions. First is, you showed some parts that had problems. Are these actually real customer parts? I mean, they look pretty simple. You wouldn't think they'd have those kind of problems. How common are these kind of problems?
Well, that's a great question, and these are actual customer parts. So they are real problems. I've done some surveys in the past with SolidWorks users, and I asked them, you know, how often, what is your success rate importing some models? It can be anywhere from, a lot say, well, it's not that bad, it's pretty good. Some get it's a disaster. It all depends a lot on the quality of the models and the frequency of the translation. So it does it quite often. You are correct, though, in that the first part looked pretty basic, right? Pretty simple. But you know, I think a lot of people don't know the quality of the translation because they don't have a way to compare it today.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, which systems do you typically find when importing files into SolidWorks tend to have more problems?
Well, I think CATIA is probably the most complex one. CATIA and Pro are right up there. Those are the ones we see a lot of the differences in. And the worst ones, though, are probably the ones that go through different converters. There are a lot of converters on the market that want to convert data to SolidWorks. And you know what they do is they basically take representation from one case and put it into a representation that SolidWorks knows how to read. Well, if you don't take care of the mathematics and the difference between them, it's kind of a crapshoot. So we see a lot of issues with converted data. And that same holds true for IGES and STEP, because everybody writes out a different STEP, IGES and STEP format. They have their own way of doing that. So we see a lot of those problems as well.
And something it's just when I think about this, not many people have this kind of validation software. I mean, not many users actually use it, which I guess is a little surprising to me. I imagine if you're not doing any import of other data formats, you don't need it. But you know, who should have this? Should it be everybody who does import of other formats, or is it something that is just a luxury to have?
Well, it depends on your workflow. We always ask our what do you do with SolidWorks? And if you're designing some fixtures where the models are reference for you, you can probably get away with inaccuracies. But if you're going to be manufacturing, making a die or a mold, and you need to make sure you got it right, you really need to validate that.
Right.
And
well, at the cost of a mold, it seems like whatever the software costs would be pretty reasonable. I'd like to pass along some attendee questions.
Sure.
Let's just start with what versions of SolidWorks does Compareworks actually support? I know a lot of people are using versions that are a few versions old. Does this work with some of the versions a couple of years old, or is it only the 2012, 2013 version?
2011, 2012, and 2013. We can make backward compatible releases to early versions of SolidWorks. Like I said earlier, we worked with SolidWorks for 95, so we can make those if it's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the bigger companies, they don't move too quickly with solid. Good.
Yeah, it's true. Some people don't keep the latest version. Jerry Rather asked, in the example you used of a casting, how long was the actual solve compare time? I know that you used some AVIs because the webinar software is a little bulky. Were those done in real time, or did you shave it off and make it look faster than it really was?
Oh, I probably cut a few seconds off here and there, but it actually is pretty quick. I would love to love it, run it live, but GoToMeeting doesn't capture all the things, the dialogues and stuff. But it's very fast, very fast. Of course, as the parts get more complex, a lot of surface curvature and stuff like that, it can take a long time because we have to do a very thorough, comparison. It's based on. You're right. That's a simple part. It was pretty realistic in terms of how much time it was. But for more complex parts, of course, it's going to take a little bit. But we're looking at seconds to maybe a minute or so. I mean, it's not that big. It's not.
Yeah.
But again, the question is, are you willing to wait a little bit longer for something that can save you a lot of time?
Yeah. Robert Luoma actually asked. He said he has multi-level assemblies with hundreds of parts to import, and can the product handle that level of complexity?
You know what? We're not limited by anything except the resources on the computer. So I imagine he's using a 64-bit environment with lots of memory, and difficult for me to answer that question because it also depends on the types of geometry. If they're all block and cylinder things, maybe not so bad. But if it's more complex, aerospace and automotive, we're certainly designed to handle that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mikhail Ryder was asking, with the example of the faces on the edge of the aircraft window, does Compareworks actually help convert those into a single surface and simplify the file? So he's asking, is there a way to actually fix this once you've identified the problem?
Okay, first of all, no. Compareworks will not fix it. It's not the job of Compareworks to do any changes to the model. We've got to be very careful about that because we're doing an audit. We're not. If we allowed things to change, we could be cheating the system here. So first of all, no, Compareworks does not do any correction. But we do have a gold product called FormatWorks, which has been gold certified for over 10 years. This is a phenomenal product for data translation. And actually, for this particular example, we translated it through FormatWorks and corrected that error, and they were quite happy with that. So it's a phenomenal product. We've had that for quite some time. So that actually builds into our competence for Compareworks because we've been doing data translation for a long time for SolidWorks. Got a very good reputation with our gold product FormatWorks, and so we've seen some very large assemblies and parts as well. So we already handle those bigger geometries with our FormatWorks products. So Compareworks will be no different.
Okay, and Robert Luoma actually followed up and asked, do you translate assemblies completely and translate the assembly structure or just one part at a time? I think you do the entire assembly automatically, right?
Yes, we support the assembly structure, absolutely. Again, when you're a SolidWorks partner provider, a gold partner, you have to do things according to the way SolidWorks works. So our products actually act and behave as if they are part of SolidWorks because of the way we've implemented them.
Yeah. There's a couple of questions about, is this available for other systems such as for Pro-E, Creo, or with Solid Edge?
Well, actually, no. Well, yes. Let me restate that. With Compareworks, we make SolidWorks. In my understanding, SolidWorks is the only product on the market that has this capability built into it like an add-in. But we also have a standalone product called Comparevidia, which is a standalone version which can work between any two CAD systems. So if you want to do this with Pro-E, all you have to simply do is load two Pro-E parts into our Comparevidia product and hit the Compare button. And so we do have a solution, a standalone solution outside of SolidWorks. So there's 2 points: SolidWorks with the Compareworks and a standalone version for the other CAD systems.
Okay, well that makes sense. There is some questions about the V6 version from a few people, and I wanted to sort of reemphasize. I've looked at this quite a lot. The V6 version of SolidWorks is not out yet, and the first version that's going to ship in the V6 series, and it will be a series of products, is going to be next year, and it will it will not be a replacement for SolidWorks. It will be a specialty product that does some functional modeling, and will be something that SolidWorks will try and sell to existing SolidWorks users, not move them away from SolidWorks V1, the existing generation, but an additional one. Over time, they'll come out with more V6 products, and who knows when they'll say, okay, we've got enough V6 products that we don't need the original V1. But more than likely what's going to happen is that people are going to have to interoperate between V1 and V6. And beyond that, everything is conjecture. But correct me if I'm wrong, Lyle, that the real advantage of this is a company that's working with the existing version of SolidWorks will be able to import and validate models from the V6 version and be sure that they're going to work right. So this will, I guess, get rid of any potential problems that might crop up with V6.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just to give you an analogy, you know, CATIA 4 to CATIA V5, how many problems did people discover through that translation? I mean, it's
and that's the same kernel that we've been told V6 is going to have.
Right.
Again, it's all conjecture. I mean, I'm assuming that the people at SolidWorks, I know some of the programmers there, they're good people. They work hard on this. They're going to try and make sure that this transition is as smooth as possible. But the CAP video software is actually designed to deal with these kind of problems.
That's right. That's right. And again, like I said earlier, the fact that they match, that's okay. That's a good answer too, right? You want that assurance that this back and forth, if it may come to that, you know, is done right.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking through the questions here and trying to make sure I filter out. Leslie DePalma asks, is there any chance that V1 files won't work with V6? Boy,
I can't answer that question.
I can answer that. Just so would be nuts not to. The one thing we're sure about is that if you have V6, they're going to be able to import V1 parts. Will you be able to send V6 parts or models back to V1? Well, that's a little bit more of a question, because if you look at the history with Dassault, you can't really send V5 parts back to V4. I mean, the CATIA V5 back to V4. That kind of well, I guess it's forwards compatibility technically, but that kind of compatibility of taking new files back to an old version is very difficult to do. But if you want to bring V6 parts back into V1, even if Dassault doesn't support it directly, you're going to be able to do it through things such as STEP, and you'll be able to validate those files using Compareworks. Is that right? Did I get that right, Lyle?
That's correct. You got it right. You got it right.
Okay. Does Compareworks allow SolidWorks to manipulate the drawing after translating?
No, it does not. Again, its purpose is to compare and show you the differences or the similarities. That's it.
Okay, but if I understand the workflow right, you can bring a file in after you translate it, and you can check it with Compareworks, see if it's wrong, you can go and fix it, or if you want to, you can add feature works or do modifications to it, and then validate it another time, a second time or a third time, and make sure. So you can do all the changes you want to. Compareworks doesn't stop you from making changes, but it lets you see what they are.
That's right. There are a lot of good users out there that know how to manually fix imported CAD models. They do it a lot. But now they have a way to make sure that the changes they make are right. And there's also a situation where you may just get a crappy model from your customer, and you don't want to fix it because there's some real problems in their file. You can also help convey that back to your customer that, look, this really isn't a translation issue I should be solving. It's something you've got to fix on your end.
Might be easier to give them a nice little report that says your file is garbage than tell them yourself.
Right.
Rob Romanowski asked, does this product work with CATIA? And I guess that would be Compare Video. Your Compare Video product would work with CATIA.
Yes, our standalone product works for CATIA. Exactly.
There's an important rule that whenever a product like this is designed to work with CATIA or with Pro-E or with NX, it costs a lot more. I've seen that it's just it's the nature of the beast. You pay a lot more for CATIA, so it seems like the add-on products do. What's the price range of these? I know you're not the only people that makes these kind of validation programs, but I've heard they're expensive. What would a standalone validation product cost? Not just yours, but in the market.
Oh, they can be anywhere between $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000. I mean, it can be thousands of dollars.
So this one, the SolidWorks is a SolidWorks add-on. I'm hoping it's less expensive than that.
Well, yes. I mean, when you start working with SolidWorks, you have to price it according to the SolidWorks add-in philosophy and mentality, and so it's much less. It's very affordable to purchase within, and we have it available through our channel, through our website. But yeah, it's priced as an add-in should be priced for SolidWorks.
That's good. Rob Romanowski also, he asked the question about CATIA v4. He said CATIA v4 cannot be uploaded to CATIA v5. You need to have both versions to work on these respective files. You do validation of both v4 and v5 files inside of Compareworks, don't you?
Comparevidea.
Comparevidea, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Comparevidea. First of all, we don't need a license for any CAD system to use Comparevidea. So if you got CATIA v4 files, CATIA v5 files, we actually license some modules from CATIA v4 and CATIA v5 so we can access the geometry into our kernel. But much like Compareworks, we can do a comparison between the CATIA v4 file and the CATIA v5 file. No problem. But that's a separate product. That's our standalone product, Comparevidea.
But Compareworks, you can, if you're importing CATIA v4 or v5 into SolidWorks, you can validate that.
If you import CATIA v4 into Solid, you can also compare that to the native representation. That's
now,
correct.
if you're using like a third-party translator for one of these files, you can still validate that?
Well, you should. Yeah, you actually should, because you're trusting their translation, what they do, to give you SolidWorks the right representation. So in that case, it's really a must to go back to the data they're importing and compare it to what they gave SolidWorks.
Mm-hmm. Bill Denker asked, can Compareworks validate a single file, or does it only compare before and after? I think that's sort of a conceptual issue. The validation only makes any sense when you're comparing against a standard or an authority, a master file. So
that's right. That's right.
Compareworks can validate any SolidWorks file you have against any external file.
Right.
And say, and
that external file could be a SolidWorks file too.
Okay, so you can actually compare different SolidWorks files.
Sure.
That's actually useful. It's interesting. Keith Schubert actually asked, what's the price for the SolidWorks add-on? And I want to kind of add, this is sold through SolidWorks VARs, and they have various deals. So I don't think we want to really talk about the exact price here because your mileage will vary on that. But it's priced the same kind of range that a lot of SolidWorks add-ons are, and I think the price is probably affordable for most SolidWorks users. If they were pricing at the same price as Comparevidea, their high-end product, it would be painful. But because there's 500,000 commercial SolidWorks users out there, they expect to sell more copies of it, and they have, and so they're able to sell at a much lower price.
And don't forget, we have some incentives going on, so contact us, and we'll get you one of our account managers. Salespeople will help you out on that. I'm actually more of a marketing technical person, so I don't really handle a lot of the sales issues, so we have other people that do that. So, like I said, we have some promotions going to the end of the year and around SolidWorks World. So,
okay, and yeah, you're going to be at SolidWorks World, and people can actually see the software in real life there.
Absolutely, we'll have all of our products there. So, for those of you that I know we're focusing today on detecting differences, but I know a lot of you are scratching their heads. Well, gee, we want to fix some of this stuff too. Well, we have FormatWorks, and we'll be showing that as well at SolidWorks World as well. So we're excited because a lot of things, a lot of new things to bring and show at SolidWorks World this year. So we're quite excited.
All right. Well, I want to close up here. We're just about at 1 o'clock, but I want to sort of add a little reassurance. There's been a lot of uncertainty and doubt about SolidWorks V6 coming up and what's Dassault going to do, and because Dassault's different than SolidWorks. We're all, I mean, I was a SolidWorks user back from 1995, and there's a lot of change. So I just want to reassure people that that this technology is available and will help make the transition or make any move you make to V6 a little bit easier. But it's particularly useful if you're doing any kind of import of file of 3D data anywhere. And if you're moving towards what they call the model-based definition, or having your 3D models as sort of the master in your process, where you use them downstream in CAM or CMM or documentation or simulation, then this type of validation is really important to have. You simply can't work in a 3D as a master world without having some kind of validation. To close things up, this webinar is going to be available online at designworldonline.com, and we will email you with the information. You can connect with us on all kinds of ridiculous social networks, and we have a website called engineeringexchange.com that's really quite fun. If you've never been there, it's worth going to. I think that's about all. I want to thank everybody for attending, and thank you, Lyle, for taking the time. I actually asked Lyle and CapVidia to do this webinar, so thank you everyone for attending, and we're going to sign off.
Very welcome. Very welcome. Thank you all.